Craig here, another edition of Now Age TV with my friend Paul Street. Hey, Paul.
Drinking kombucha.
He's got kombucha. You know, we should always mention that Paul is a doctor in case you find yourself hurt during this broadcast. But he does not accept insurance, so, you know, you're on your own. It's all cash out of pocket.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not covered by any known major insurance company.
Yeah. So if something in your own history is kaput, talk to Paul. He's a doctor of history.
Yeah, I got a friend named Louis who might be able to hook you up with an insurance deal. Okay, he's with one of the syndicates.
Yeah, there you go. So the topic, and I think it's good that we have a topic because otherwise, otherwise we just go off
topics.
We just go off the rails. Russiagate and capitalist plunder of the earth. Who thought that they would be connected? Who thought that those two things could possibly be connected? But in your counterpiece piece today, in my piece that I wrote last night, we were both talking about the same thing. And your piece in Counterpunch, Russia trumps ecocide at the petroleum broadcast system, which people also know as PBS.
PBS.
Yeah, or, you know, professional bullshit, or however you want to call it.
I always put the P in quote marks.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is that you know, we hold, or liberals hold, public broadcasting sacrosanct. You know, whether it's PBS or NPR. And, you know, NPR, I was just saying to my wife in the car today that it's become almost like a Saturday Night Live parody of itself. You know, the whole speaking style and the whole sort of, we're going to create this sort of, we're going to talk this guy who's a poet and, you know, whatever it is. I mean, it's all this kind of very safe, cozy kind of reporting. But then when it comes to politics, boy, they really toe the party line, which is like, you know, straight up, conventional. You could be MSNBC, CNN, whatever it is, and it's on.
Oh, in some ways it's worse. I would say that, it's the only network I get on TV, so I watch the NewsHour when I'm making dinner, right?
Yeah.
And I would say on foreign policy that it's probably even worse. I mean, it's the PBS NewsHour is like a branch of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's really quite amusing. You know, this was pretty much by design going back. There's a wonderful media scholar named Robert McChesney who's written about this, and when the public broadcasting came in, it was strictly circumscribed and designed in such a way that they wouldn't be paid enough to really be self-sustaining. They'd have to rely on corporate contributions, and they really wouldn't be public, as in for the public. They wouldn't be about the public. They wouldn't be about labor. They wouldn't be about workers. They wouldn't be about the community. You know, ordinary working class people. They'd sort of be about kind of fancy stuff, you know, so there's a lot of cooking stuff and a lot of classical music and a lot of sort of upscale. That was always supposed to be sort of about the upper middle class, and very specifically not supposed to be about, because when this stuff was coming in, there were still labor movements.
Yeah.
And they were very worried about that. We're not going to have this be taken over by the working class or something like that. So it was always for this very sort of quichoisie market anyway.
Yeah, and you know, if you want that, go to Pacifica Broadcasting, or, you know, any of these real, you know, I mean, which is real public. You know,
and they've always been suspect and under attack from the right-wing watchdog groups that they almost bend over backwards to even be more hawkish on things like foreign policy. And, you know, Judy Woodruff and the rest of them, any issue comes on, and they just have on, you know, someone from the Democratic Party to give one side of it, you know, and then someone from the Republican Party to give the other side of it. I swear to God, if they had a debate about whether the Earth was round or flat, you know, they'd have somebody from Judy would have someone from, you know, the National Geographical Society to prove that the world is round, and they'd bring someone in from the Flat Earth Society to give the other.
And it would be very balanced. In your piece, you were outraged, the fact that the second to lead story, of which they gave 8 minutes according to your timing, was about this iceberg the size of Delaware that broke off of the Larsen ice shelf in Antarctica, which should be enough to, you know, stop everybody from eating their cornflakes and pay attention.
And, or smoke crack or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And you wrote, then came the killer sign-off. The NewsHour's Antarctic segment ended with a big smile on Miss Woodruff's face. All right, our iceberg man, Miles O'Brien, Judy said, thank you very much. Now we continue our series, Inside Putin's Russia.
Back to regularly scheduled programming. Russia, 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 all the time, 24/7. CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and of course, PBS. And by the way, I always put the P in quote marks. Sometimes it's for Pentagon, sometimes it's for petroleum. I suppose you could get presidential in there too every once in a while, but now they've got a bad president in there they don't like. It was very much presidential broadcasting system when Obama was in. That's clearly not the case with Trump. And when I say petroleum, Exxon has always been one of the very big funders of the of PBS. And so I noticed that in that story they made sure to sort of qualify whether or not this ice chunk the size of Delaware, was it Delaware? Yeah, breaking off of the Antarctic.
Yeah.
Which this glaciologist is trying to get Miles O'Brien, their science editor, to understand this is catastrophic. This is a catastrophic scale ice loss, right? But they make sure to sort of qualify and say that we'll have to wait till the science comes in to figure out whether this is definitely related to climate change. And she as much as just flat out tells him that we're finding all this ice loss is totally connected to warming atmosphere and warming ocean. I mean, there's no serious doubt about it. They qualify that, and that's because they depend on Exxon. There's also Koch brother money into PBS even. It's really quite hideous.
Yeah. Well, on the NPR program this morning, one of their nationally syndicated shows out of Washington, this one is, and their weekly roundup, and they talked, of course, the last story. Oh yes, and this piece of ice that broke off, out of your ice bin, out of your refrigerator, But again, they had to qualify it with there's question as to whether or not this is related to climate change. Even on NPR, they throw in that disclaimer.
There you go. I loved at the end when there's this silly sort of, I call it in the piece, this pillow talk joke between Judy Woodruff, who's the host of the NewsHour, who, by the way, is a fully paid member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and she's calling Miles the Iceberg Man. This is like a funny, cute story, like it's about Santa Claus or something, for Christ's sake. No, this is the destruction of the life support system of the planet, right? The cryosphere is melting before our very eyes in catastrophic kinds of ways. But he says there at the end that there's one piece of good news, which is that this gigantic ice chunk the size of Delaware is probably not going to interfere with navigation at all. It's like, Jesus Christ. Oh, wouldn't that be tragic if this rude anti-commerce iceberg actually slowed down the flows of global capitalism? The very system that is the growth-addicted system that is destroying life on Earth?
Yeah, I mean, yes. No. It's so absurd.
It was. I had a lot of. Sometimes it's just either laugh or cry or laugh very darkly. I unfortunately find myself engaged in a lot of dark humor here.
Yeah. There's no way.
It's a self-defense mechanism.
Yeah, and so I will link to that piece as always. Now, interesting. My piece. Within You, Without You. As always, I need to pull some sort of a song because that's my thing. Otherwise, I just can't figure out how to write.
That's who you are.
That's who I am. And so I picked up the I'll admit I got it from the library because I didn't want to buy the Beatles reissue of Sgt. Pepper. But I said I'll listen to it and I'll go ahead and copy it. Which I did.
You must have a good library.
Yeah, it's a good library here. Yeah. We, and
supported with high property taxes.
Yeah, I will say I don't do that to indie artists, but to the Beatles, I will copy their stuff unashamedly. Sure. And in listening to that album again, one that occurred to me is, wow, that's not my favorite Beatles album, Sgt. Pepper.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, it just kind of gets, I don't know, there's something. It doesn't feel like a rock and roll album to me. But George Harrison's tune on there, Within You, Without You, which is done with all the Indian musicians, and it comes in at like 5 minutes, which is unusually long. And I said, was certainly compelling, and it kind of got me thinking into this idea that why are we worried about Russia when we're imploding from within?
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of this was my quote from that. George Harrison's "Within You, Without You," certainly the most compelling and most out of place entry on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, was inspired by the natural forces uniting the world, according to Harrison. The opening line, "We were talking about the space between us all." And then I went on to write, sadly, many who in 1967 were uniting under Harrison's call evolved into self-seeking capitalists, some even rising the corporate ladder at Big Pharma and the like. The reason I mentioned Big Pharma is because, as far as imploding from within, I kind of focused on the opioid crisis, which I've been writing about kind of late. I just find myself, and also because here in Palm Beach County, we are like ground zero for a certain aspect of the opioid crisis because this is like rehab central. And because of loopholes in Obamacare, whereas anybody up to 26 has to be covered on their, parents' plan. And then under the mental health provisions, you can relapse over and over again, and they have to, cover your treatment. So these so-called sober houses that opened up all around here, particularly in the town to the north in Delray Beach, it's crisis. I mean, Politico wrote a piece about it last week. Really, in-depth piece about how horrific it is. So it's just, and
you could go with the opioid crisis. You could go with half the population is either poor or near poor. You could talk about the 21% of kids in the country that are living below half the poverty level, the 1% of the population that owns more than 90% of wealth, and probably a roughly comparable percentage of the so-called elected Democratic officials. It's just across the board. How about mass incarceration? 1 in 3 black males in this country is saddled with the lifelong mark of a crippling felony record. I don't think Vladimir Putin did that. I don't think Russia did that. I don't think Russia has anything to do with any of that, right? I don't think Russia made Hillary Clinton run the worst presidential campaign in the history of presidential campaigns last year. It was a joke. It was pathetic. I would like to recommend to your readers this book by Joe Loria, by Hillary Clinton. I don't know if this is going to make it on the screen. Joe Loria. It just came out OR Press, and it just shows all this insanity about Trump and Russia. We can forget how absolutely horrific and awful the whole political system is, including, above all, the dismal, dollar-drenched, demobilizing, depressing, sociopathological neoliberal Democrats. Russia didn't make them so terrible. It didn't. The corporations did that. There's still no real smoking gun of any kind on Russia. Even if we could come up with even if they do come up with anything, something real, serious, and substantive on Russia, it's a drop in the bucket, okay, compared to what the United States does to other countries' political process, what corporations do to our own political process in this country. And it really is this great diversion. And I would say, even just on the level of Trump hating, right? I mean, let's get it. A lot of the media personnel, they're Democrats. They're all just kind of vaguely liberal Democrats. And they hate Trump, okay? And so that's an interesting question. It's interesting to watch them go after Trump and abuse Trump. But why are they so focused when they go after Trump on the Russia angle? There are so many ways that you could go after Trump in ways that might matter to liberals other than just Russia, right? I noticed that you quoted Masha Gessen in your latest piece.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Masha Gessen is a Russian-American journalist, activist, critic of both Putin and Trump, and she comes out and she just calls this stuff total lunacy. That we're focusing on this and giving him a pass, giving Trump a pass on basically plundering. I mean, this is like, talk about late-stage capitalism, on fire. I mean, whatever's left, any regulations, we're going to blow a hole in everything that we can do. We're going to frack in your friggin' backyard, frack in the graveyard, frack at the church, frack at the, in the swimming pool. We're going to be, it doesn't matter, frack in the at the national parks, right? That's going to be happening too.
Right.
Forget about offshore drilling. All of it's going to happen now. And who's there to kind of talk about it? We're the Democrats. My congressperson down here keeps posting on Facebook about how he's calling for some sanctions. He's Democrat, calling for some, more sanctions. Sanctions. We want the sanctions on Russia. I keep posting. I say, shut up. Just shut up already with Russia. I mean, give us freaking single payer.
Well, there were a number of. There was this piece in the Hill 3 weeks ago, right? The Washington D.C. based magazine that captures national politics.
Yeah.
And they had some poll, and they also had reports from a lot of these town hall meetings that had been going on in Democratic congressmen, and constituents are coming out and saying, please shut up about this crap. Enough about Russia. Enough. I think you're the one who said to me, it's like Al Pacino in the movie Dog Day Afternoon. We're dying out here, right? Yeah. I mean, literally, we've got people addicted to opiates. They want to kick millions of people off of health insurance. We can't. Where people are getting fired even for trying to form a union. Black people are still being disproportionately. I mean, just fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Racism, classism, sexism, and ecocide. And this is what you're talking about. You're talking about goddamn MFing Russia 24/7. Of course, with the media in the lead. And I do want to add here that, I mean, I focused on PBS and the NewsHour in that Counterpunch piece today. But I mean, it goes for the New York Times, it goes for the Washington Post, and it goes for CNN, the nation's leading cable news network. This is what you see in every airport and hotel room around the country, blaring, 24/7 to CNN. And I take it you saw that, I'm sure liberals are denouncing it as inherently false and wrong because it came out of a right-wing website. But I'm talking about Project Veritas and what they did going into the CNN headquarters. I mean, maybe you want to tell viewers a bit more about that, because I thought that was just incredible.
Well, that was James O'Keefe. I mean, he was the one who got in trouble for the Acorn hit he did a couple of years ago. So he was kind of questionable there. And he might have been also the person involved with the Planned Parenthood hit. This is
he's kind of a bastard.
Yeah, and this is the another interesting topic, because this has come up in the past kind of week or so about working with activists on the right, or I mean, you guys call them, they're activists of their own stripe. But when the common we'll say enemy or the common adversary is the establishment media, and left and right have common common angst and common
Sometimes.
cause.
Right.
Doesn't mean that we have to be such purists that we're not going to talk to those guys because they've got they're misogynists, they're this, they're that.
I mean, it sounds like this guy O'Keefe's a real bastard, someone I wouldn't want to go out and have dinner with or be involved in political struggle with. But here's the facts. They sent in an undercover reporter who apparently knew some key people at CNN, including, I'm going to mispronounce this guy's name. Wasn't it John Bonifield? Who's a co-producer?
Oh, yeah.
He's a medical co-producer, but he's a co-producer of CNN. And somehow this guy from Project Veritas, which is run by O'Keefe, which, yes, is a right-wing Republican hit shop, but the videotape and the audio tape don't lie. So they got this guy in there, and they're talking to the CNN producer, and he says pretty much, we're running. Oh, this is what he said. He says, I probably shouldn't be telling you this. And it's cold on tape. He says, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but we were in a meeting the other day, and the president of CNN, who's Jeff Zucker, came in and said, good job with the climate accords, everybody. They did a day on the climate accords. And what the climate accords means is when Trump officially pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords,
right?
Which was a fairly weak attempt, to stem global warming. Yeah. He said, "Good work on the climate accords, but we're going back to Russia 24/7 now."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And as the conversation goes on, this guy Bonifield, who's a producer at CNN, tells the undercover Project Veritas reporter that, as far as he can tell, this Russia story, is complete bullshit. They don't have any smoking guns. If they had anything by now, he points out, and I think he's right, if they had anything real, it would have been leaked. They leak all the time. Blah, blah, blah. And he goes on and on like that, and he says, this is because it's for ratings. See, I think it's about more than ratings, but this is what he tells the guy. He says it's about ratings. A lot of our viewers are liberals, and this is what they want. They want Trump, Trump, Trump. So we run with the Russia thing. Later, the guy talks to Van Jones, who's a big CNN talking head and rose to national prominence many years ago on the climate issue. Green jobs. He wrote a book called The Green Collar Economy. And he looks the guy in the face and says, this Russia thing's a big nothing burger. That's Van Jones's phrase, a big nothing burger. So, what really leapt out to me was the killing of the climate issue in particular in that segment, which Project Veritas really didn't run with that. That didn't bother them that much, right? Because they're right-wing Republicans, they don't care about the climate issue. But it's there, and it's cold, and it's on tape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it comes from a right-wing website. I'm sorry, the audio doesn't lie. So, a broken clock tells the time, accurately twice a day, and this is the case where Veritas got it right.
And also, look, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, that adage is as old as conflict itself, and sometimes you have to, you have to join forces with people who you just don't agree 100 or only agree 10% with.
You can make tactical things. The United States and finally realized it had to link up with the Soviet Union to defeat Nazi Germany.
Well, I left off with my piece saying the biggest insult to struggling, disempowered Americans is the oft-repeated refrain, quote, Putin undermined American democracy, when in fact the U.S. is nothing other than a corporate kleptocracy with no value in common humanity, only in the profits that can be plunged from our pores. I mean, and leads us into, I had this conversation the other day, which I have online, about single payer now with Kevin Zeese. And Kevin, I'll link to that too, which is really, Kevin kind of brings everybody up to date with what's going on. People don't know Kevin. Kevin's on the front lines of, like every social justice movement. Kevin and his partner Margaret Flowers are like, they are like in the trenches on the front lines. And they are also pushing this single payer. They've got a whole website and a whole effort going on with it. So
single payer is just Medicare for all.
Yeah, Medicare for all. Yep.
You're born, and because you're a human being, you get a card that entitles you to health insurance for the rest of your life.
But the question now becomes, and how this all ties in, is the capitalist plunder of the earth thing, is that there's resistance from the Democratic Party, for single payer. That's where the resistance is, okay? Republicans, forget about it. We know what they represent, But the resistance is from the Democratic Party, okay, which now Bernie Sanders has decided to hold back on his single-payer bill, his Medicare for All single-payer bill, because we have to fix Obamacare first. We have to fix the corporate, Heritage Foundation.
Well, there's 112 people in the U.S. House that are Democrats that are technically on board for House Bill 676, which is the original traditional John Conyers single health payer bill. But it's just kind of a symbolic kind of thing they do so that they can say they're progressive. It's kind of like some of my neighbors in a 100% white neighborhood putting up Black Lives Matter signs, right? But there's zero integration or access to the resources of that neighborhood for black people. It's just, it's just sort of performative. It's just sort of a symbolic thing, and they don't really mean it. And what's that about? Well, that's about the long-standing turn of the Democratic Party to the corporate sector, to corporate sponsorship, and the decline of the labor movement, which of course they've aided and abetted and been part of, which is no longer really there anymore as any kind of countervailing power. So everything's about what corporations want, and absolutely, the Democratic Party sort of become the leading opponent in many ways of real health insurance reform. And I mean, when you really think about it, I doubt that the Republicans could have got through the Affordable Care Act, that liberals would have been, because of the partisan identification, if someone had come up with a bill like Obama's bill in 2009, that basically should have been subtitled "All Power to the Big Insurance and Drug Companies." Oh, the liberals would have been an arm in arm, and they would have pointed out accurately that the bill came out of the right-wing Republican Heritage Foundation, and they would have led resistance to it. But no, they had what they thought was a nice, progressive, smart, sophisticated, professional class, technically African-American president, and so they got behind it. And, you know, Obama's machinations and his complete exile of very impressive single-payer personalities like John Conyers, the Detroit area congressman, and Quentin Young and others, and the complete removal of single-payer advocates from that process was absolutely disgusting. I don't know that a Republican president could have pulled off something as nauseating and right-wing as that. It's only a Democrat that can really do that. It's kind of like only Kissinger and Nixon, you know, could open up open up with China and Russia. Only a Democrat could pass a corporatist health care bill. Yeah.
So it comes down to then the larger question. Is the Democrat, we'll call the liberal media, obsession with Russiagate, is it just a political ploy because they think, you know, oh, we're going to knock Trump out of office and what have you? Even if they knock Trump out of office, we still have Republicans controlling every branch of government. So I don't know where that really leads. Or is it maybe about the midterms and we're going to use this to, you know, politically for the midterms? Or are they all just capitalist gangsters? Are they all just distracting us? So everything that we're talking about here.
Well, I think it's a lot of those things. I think you find a lot when big decisions are made and strategies are made, people sit around, and I generally find there's about what sways it is there's kind of a tipping point. There's like 4 or 5 things that come together, and there are different ways in which it makes sense. One you didn't mention is that the Democratic Party at its elite level is very tied in with the Council on Foreign Relations and its imperial mission of preempting. I mean, the one, for crazy and stupid and ludicrous and idiotic as Donald Trump is, for whatever reasons, he had this kind of sensible idea that we ought to normalize relations with Russia and stand down from the possibilities of World War III with them over Syria and Ukraine. And that is anathema to the elite Democratic neoliberal warmonger crowd. And so I think part of why Russia, I mean, it's interesting to me, you know, the CNN guy says, we want to beat up on Trump all the time because we have liberal viewers. And I go, okay, I get that you want to do that. But why do you want to beat up on him only on Russia? My God, you could beat up on him on immigration. You could beat up on him on racism. You could beat up on him on sexism. You could beat up on him on nativism. I mean, and above all, the greatest existential issue of our time, climate. The guy's a fucking death knell for the human species because he wants to completely deregulate energy. But no, Russia, you know. It's an interesting question, why the obsession with Russia? And I think that's also part of it, that they are committed to this new Cold War NATO agenda, NATO expansion in Eastern Europe, provoking Putin, rolling back Russian power, because they're imperialists. And the Democrats have always been sort of the most sophisticated imperialist party in this country. And that goes back to Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's not just our era. And I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is that on those other issues, which are more homeland issues, which are more domestic issues, they're deeply complicit themselves. They're deeply complicit on healthcare, on race, on plutocracy, you know, on corporate ownership of the political process. Russia is kind of a convenient distraction, you know, and it distracts from why they lost the goddamn election to the most unpopular, stupidest, most ape-like subhuman president that ever dragged his knuckles into the White House. They did that. You know, and that's, by the way, that's what this Luria guy's book is about. It's easy to forget how awful Hillary Clinton really truly was. She said the worst. And one thing he talks about here is just the worst presidential campaign that was ever run. Well, that's to say that Russia did it is a way for him and their media friends at CNN and the New York Times and all that to avoid that, blame Russia. So I think it's about externalization. But I've said too much.
Well, that said, I think we've kind of chewed this one over, and we're going to keep to our commitment to try to keep this to a half an hour. I think we're there. So people should go to Paul's website, which we'll link to, paulstreet.org, and they should go to what's called the subscribe button. And that's where they support Paul financially in this work. And last time we spoke, Paul said that he didn't want to get rich doing this, but I think you should make him rich. So that's my call. You should go there and you should make him frickin' rich. Okay?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
If you want to support me in the lifestyle to which I want to be accustomed, that's going to take it.
See if you're up to the challenge, people. And
right.
you could also go to my website, nowagepress.com, and find the support button and make me rich, because we both deserve to be rich.
Yeah, we deserve
because
that.
If it's all melting, we want nice life rafts.
Right, and we want to be able to travel around the planet and see every nation on it before it finally collapses. Right? I mean, that's dark humor there. That is a reference to a Facebook post that I just made about these hideous older baby boomers who made it big here in town and are just now doing nothing but flying around the world and looking at it. And I was like, great.
Yep. That's a whole other topic. All right, we will talk soon.
You bet.
Bye.
Okay.